All right, let's dive in. Today, we're exploring two really powerful and kind of contradictory ideas. On one hand, we've got the systems that build massive success, and on the other, the wisdom of knowing when to draw a line in the sand and say, that's enough. Let's get into it. So, this is really the big question we're kicking off with. Is success just a random lightning strike? Being in the right place at the right time? Or is it something you can actually build, something you can repeat and scale through a very deliberate process? So here's our game plan. First, we're going to look at the practical nuts and bolts systems for getting things done. Then, we'll flip the script and talk about the dangerous trap of always wanting more. After that, we'll get into the real power of setting limits, and we'll finish up with the tough choices you have to make to protect what's actually important. Okay, section 1. Let's talk about building that engine for success. We're going to check out the repeatable systems that some of the most brilliant people in history have used to cook up world-changing ideas and build, well, pretty much unbreakable habits. Check this out. Sam Altman, the guy behind OpenAI, he doesn't just sit around and wait for inspiration to hit. No, he's got a system. All week long, he's just jotting down ideas, anything and everything. Then comes the weekend. He literally rips all the pages out, spreads them on a table, and starts looking for connections, for patterns. And here's the kicker. Once he finds a pattern, he throws the pages away. The point isn't to create an archive, it's to systematically turn his daily life into breakthrough ideas. And what's wild is that this principle is totally timeless. Yeah, you have Sam Altman with his tech innovation system, but go back a few centuries and you find Beethoven doing almost the exact same thing with music. He was constantly scribbling little musical ideas in his notebooks, tweaking them, combining them over years, and those little fragments, they eventually became masterpieces, like his legendary Fifth Symphony. This brings us to the raw power of just being consistent. There's this great story about a 23-year-old stockbroker in Canada named Trent. Every morning, he'd start with 2 jars on his desk. One was filled with 120 paper clips. And after every single sales call he made, he'd move 1 paper clip over to the empty jar. His rule was simple. He couldn't go home until all 120 clips were moved. That ridiculously simple system, it made him a millionaire and brought in a whopping $5 million for his company. So the real key here is finding that sweet spot of difficulty. It's called the Goldilocks rule. If something's too easy, you're bored. If it's way too hard, you just get frustrated and quit. But if a task is just a tiny bit outside your current comfort zone, you hit this amazing state of peak motivation. The comedian Steve Martin lived in this zone for 15 years. He started with a 5-minute magic act and just added 30 seconds at a time, slowly perfecting his craft until he became an absolute legend. Okay, so you've built your systems, you're seeing success. Awesome. But here's where we pivot, because this is where things can get really, really dangerous. We're now heading into what I call the trap of more, that endless, nagging pursuit that can actually turn winning into losing. This quote just nails the whole idea perfectly. The story goes, the author Kurt Vonnegut was at a party with Joseph Heller, who wrote Catch-22. Vonnegut points to some billionaire in the room and says, that guy made more money today than your book has made in its entire history. Heller's reply was just perfect. He said, yes, but I have something he will never have. Enough. And our whole society is obsessed with this idea of accumulation. It's kind of crazy when you think about it. Take the average power drill in a household. Any guesses on how much it's actually used over its entire lifetime? 13 minutes. That's it, 13 minutes. But millions of us have one just sitting there because we're afraid of the day we might need it, of not having enough. And that personal fear skills up into a full-blown planetary disaster. Every single year, 39,000 tons of brand new, unsold clothing from fast fashion brands gets dumped in the Atacama Desert in Chile. It's literally a mountain of clothes, a monument to a culture that just can't stop, that never ever says enough. The environmental toll is just staggering, right? But what about the human cost? What happens to people, really successful, brilliant people, when that hunger for more just completely spirals out of control? So let's look at 2 cautionary tales. These are the stories of men who climbed all the way to the top of the mountain, only to throw themselves off because they just couldn't define what enough meant for them. Meet Rajat Gupta. This guy's story is incredible. He started in the slums of Kolkata and rose to become the CEO of McKinsey, the most prestigious consulting firm on the planet. By 2008, he was worth $100 million. But it wasn't enough. He desperately wanted to be a billionaire, and that one desire, that one unchecked goal, pushed him to commit insider trading, which completely destroyed his reputation and landed him in federal prison. And then, of course, you've got Bernie Madoff, a Wall Street icon. Now, the thing that's so crazy about Madoff is that he was already running a hugely successful, totally legitimate business. People were literally begging to give him their money. But that wasn't enough for him. He started a secret Ponzi scheme on the side that ballooned to over $64 billion, completely wiping out charities, retirement funds, and family savings before the whole house of cards came tumbling down. So how do we stop this from happening to us? We have to define enough. Seriously. First, stop moving the goalposts every time you hit a target. Second, you have to quit the game of social comparison. It's a game you will never, ever win. There will always be someone with a bigger boat. Third, understand that enough isn't about depriving yourself. It's a guardrail. It's there to protect you from total ruin. And finally, know what you should never, ever risk for more money: your reputation, your family, your freedom, and your happiness. This brings us to our final and maybe our most challenging section. Once you know what your mission is, and you know what enough looks like, how do you protect it? This is where we get into the really uncomfortable idea that sometimes being truly effective means you can't always afford to be nice. Let's think about this with a little parable. Imagine you're a lighthouse keeper. You have one job, one single job: keep that light burning. It's the only thing that keeps passing ships from smashing into the dangerous rocks below. Simple, right? So one stormy night, a woman comes knocking on your door. She's desperate, her child is sick, and she's begging you for just a little bit of your lamp oil to keep their home warm. The nice thing to do, the compassionate thing, is to help her. So, what do? You give her the oil. You do the kind thing. But as the night goes on, the consequences start to set in. Your lamp, now low on fuel, starts to flicker. The light gets weaker and weaker, and then it goes out. Complete darkness. And then, in the pitch black, you hear it, a horrifying, loud crash echoing from the sea. A ship, with hundreds of people on board, couldn't see the danger. It's wrecked on the rocks. In your effort to be kind in that one moment, you failed at your one critical mission. And look, this isn't just a fairy tale. Think about a special forces officer on a critical mission, something they've planned for years. Suddenly, an innocent child wanders by and discovers their hidden ambush spot. If that kid runs back and alerts the village, the mission is over, and the whole team could be wiped out. It's a truly impossible choice between compassion in the moment and the long-term mission. For a modern example, just look at someone like Elon Musk. Now, this isn't about saying you should be like him, but stories from his former employees all paint a picture of someone who is completely, utterly obsessed with the mission. There's a famous story about him calling an employee into the office on the day his child was being born. Again, the point isn't to praise the behavior. It's to understand that achieving huge, audacious goals sometimes requires a ruthless, relentless focus. And that's what I want to leave you with. This is the big question that brings everything together, and it's for you to think about. It's easy for us to judge these extreme examples, right? But what about in your own life? Think about your health goals, your career, the future you want for your family. What important long-term mission are you maybe sacrificing little by little, day by day, all for the simple, immediate comfort of just being nice?